Live na po. Live na po.
Alright. Magandang hapon mga Ka-PICSPro. Magandang hapon, BP Shida. EDRD.
Magandang hapon.
Magandang hapon also. And good afternoon to our guest speakers from Silverfort. Hi, Hontit. Say hi to our live viewers.
Hello, everyone.
Yeah, so we'll just wait for a bit and say hi to our viewers.
Okay.
So good afternoon, everyone. We have our very first comment from Tebo. Magandang hapon din sa iyo, sir. I actually miss everyone. So I know I've been MIA for quite a while. Just been very busy, no? So, but I'm back and I'm glad to be here with you guys. And speaking of MIA, our VP Mia is also gonna come back soon. Namimiss niya rin kayong lahat. So, gusto niya ulit kayong makakwentuhan. Hopefully by next month, VP Reese, makabalik na si VP Mia sa ating KC.
Yes, we're excited for the comeback of VP Via. Yeah,
I'm
so
very
I think we have...
kami sa kanya.
We have good afternoon, Sir 𝐿𝐥𝐲𝐝. Magandang hapon also to Dorwin Caballero and Randy Debibar from our Facebook live audiences, viewers.
Kamusta naman po ang entire week natin, mga Ka-PICSPro? Very busy po.
Busy week, yeah.
Hindi uso ang pahinga hanggang weekend.
So EDRD, maybe you can also share our ganap on this weekend, di ba?
Yes.
Our 𝐵ICSPro Cares program while we are waiting for some viewers.
Yes po. So if last week po we did the memorandum of understanding signing with our partners para po sa ating information awareness drive in Angono, this Saturday magki-kickstart na po tayo in one of their barangays in Barangay Kalayaan. So this is a part of the advocacy of the 𝐵ICSPro under the 𝐵ICSPro Cares program natin. So magpo-provide po tayo doon ng information drive against of course, the harmful effects of the internet to women and children, particularly at ang ating unang-unang beneficiaries, unang-unang magiging target to be the people of Angono Rizal. So on Saturday po, makikita niyo po kami doon. So hopefully we can do the same sa iba pa pong mga communities na meron po tayo all over the Philippines, hopefully.
Yes, on Sunday, no? Right?
Yes, Sunday po tayo.
Yes, yeah.
Hindi
So it's going to be walang weekend.
Walang weekend sa 𝐵ICSPro, tinotoo po natin yan. Kaya sa weekend makikita niyo po kami sa Angono Rizal.
So every Sunday yon ang ating...
Yes, so ang target po natin is every Sunday at least we conduct to a number of, we are catering to a number of constituents po coming from the different barangays in Angono Rizal.
Okay.
Ay, may bagong kasama tayo. Mukhang girl power tayo
Yes.
Just in time for the Women's Month. Hi, VP Ruby.
Speaking of our 𝐵ICSPro Cares.
Ang news ng 𝐵ICSPro Cares, si VP Ruby.
Yeah. Magandang hapon also to AJ Teles. Good afternoon. May pa-shoutout ka ba sa Dax Nation? Good afternoon also to JC. Mandaming fans ni Ray.
Very supportive ang ating crew from MTech.
Yes, thank you so much.
Shout out
Yeah, I
to
think,
Chairman, lumilipad na ata ngayon.
Yes, shout out to Mr. Chair. Sawadee ka.
Yes.
Sawadee ka.
whatever. from Thailand, fresh from Thailand.
Yeah, I think si VP Ruby is still connecting her audio. Yeah.
So
So,
actually, yeah,
may-
Iris, binabanggit lang kanina ni ED Arlene ang ating Happy International Women's Month. So I think
yes.
magandang feature natin, no, ang ating mga women leaders here sa 𝐼CSPro.
Congratulations muna kay VP Reese kasi siya ang unang first salvo. VP Fila, next ka na.
Feature.
That is right. Oo, na-feature siya sa The Right You. Tama po ba, VP Reese?
The new hue. Yeah.
Okay.
New hue. Yeah. Thank you so much, the new hue, for the feature for the International Women's Month celebration. Yeah. So I think we can start, right?
Yes. po.
Arlene?
Yes. So
Yeah.
today mga
Maybe you can introduce
ka-PICSPro,
our topic.
yes po. Thank you, VP Lee. So sa ating mga ka-PICSPro dyan, for watching wherever you are in the world today, very, very, very interesting po ang ating topic for today's case. So have you ever been a victim of what we call a ransomware? Yes, hindi po kayo nagkakamali, hindi lang po tao, hindi lang po bata ang kinikidnap at hiniheld for ransom nowadays. Pati po ang vital information nyo pwede na rin makuha ng iba. So for today's case, let us learn more on how we can prevent and what we should know about ransomware and how can this affect our security. So VP Reese, please take it away.
Yeah, so good afternoon again to our mga ka-PICSPro. So I would like to welcome and introduce our speaker for today. So Mr. 𝐻onkit Chang from Silverfort. 𝐻onkit benefits from the 25 years in the information technology industry and 12 years in the field of cybersecurity. He had extensive experience in software development, consulting, project management, pre-sales and business development experience in sectors such as banking, insurance, government, healthcare, education, and large multinational companies. So 𝐻onkit currently runs the Philippine business for Silverfort, which is a leading-edge cybersecurity vendor company. 𝐻onkit has a deep passion to continually work together with its customers and partners to improve their current cybersecurity posture with the right use of tools, methods, and processes. As a member of the Singapore FinTech Association, he also advises and mentors startups in their nascent stages of development. Without further ado, I would like to welcome Mr. 𝐻onkit Chang from Silverfort. Hi, 𝐻onkit.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Yeah. Thank you for having me here. So basically, I'm between you and your happy hour on a Friday evening. So I hope you will find something that you can take away with you today that will be of use to you, right? So this session is not my last session with everyone here. Feel free to reach out to me, right? Through our lovely ladies here. I know if you have further questions or clarifications, we'll be most happy to attend to them. So allow me to share my screen. Yes. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, 𝐻onkit.
Okay, good. Yeah. So what we want to discuss today is something quite close to my heart, which is the prevalence of ransomware attacks. Ransomware is not anything new, as I'm going to discuss very shortly, but it is prevalent enough and is serious enough to affect a lot of government agencies and enterprises. But the good news is that we do have ways to mitigate or even defeat it, which is what I want to talk about. And this is coming from so the caveat here, right? This is coming from a Silverfort perspective, right? And nobody else's. So let's begin. So if you look at ransomware, all right, as I would say a type of cyber threat per se, 10 years ago or so, they were more like, in the old days, you might get things like advertisements or trackers, right? Or even now you get trackers, right? So they are more of a nuisance rather than a serious threat. What happened is that a few years ago, for those of you who are familiar with the events that happened at Nordisk, right, which is one of the largest shipping companies in the world. So this is where the WannaCry and NotPetya attacks came, right, which are actually ransomware, which actually activated something called lateral movement, right? Lateral movement is just another way of saying that something comes into your environment, wherever it's malicious or benign, and moves from PC to PC, server to server, right? System to system. That is lateral movement. Yeah. And eventually, ransomware has become something of a serious threat, right? So, in fact, I would say, based on studies by people like Gartner and Forrester, up to 82% of ransomware attacks will involve lateral movement at some stage. Yeah. So you get the link here, right? Ransomware uses lateral movement. Yeah. And the worst thing about it is that for lateral movement, you don't need special skills. There's a lot of automated tools and techniques that you can just download or buy cheaply from the dark web to allow you to do mass ransomware attacks. Yeah. So basically, even a kid in high school could do it. So a little bit more about ransomware, right? So how it works and how it moves around in your environment. Yeah. So if you look at where my pointer is on the slide, right? At the initial delivery, they will infect one machine, right? So this is what we call patient zero. So this is where they'll download the file or the system. Let's say a phishing email, right? Somebody opens it, bang, that person will become patient zero, right? What happens is that this ransomware will look for other systems to propagate, right? Because ultimately, what they want to do is to get hold of somebody with very high privileges, right? Like an administrator, for example. Typically, unless they are dead lucky, right? Typically, the first person that opens or gets exposed to the ransomware would not be the administrator. So their task is to look for somebody with administrator rights. And this is where the lateral movement comes in, right? They will go from system to system. And this is where you can see exponential growth in the number of machines being infected. So it only makes sense, right? If you can detect somebody here as patient 0 or patient 1, depending on how you want to number it, you can contain the attack in a far easier manner. It's like, somebody's house catches fire, right? If it starts in the kitchen and you put out the fire in the kitchen, it's a lot easier to control rather than the whole house being on fire. So this is the same concept. So moving forward, right, we are talking about lateral movement being I would say a critical part of ransomware, or how a ransomware moves around and propagates itself. So what we do recognize at Silverfort is that lateral movement itself, if you want to categorize it as a threat, it is categorized as identity, right? Why is identity used or utilized in the lateral movement? Very simple. The key objective of a ransomware in the lateral movement is to compromise a user account. Remember what I said earlier about ransomware actors, what they want to do is to get hold of admin accounts with or user IDs with administrative rights, right? Because once you're an IT administrator, you can pretty much do anything or access anywhere you want. Yeah. So let's say a certain user ID or user account has been compromised. You can see here it turns red color, right? They will go through the Active Directory, right, to look for more user IDs. And with each user ID, you will get access to different privilege systems or privilege accounts, so to speak. Yeah. And infect them. Yeah. So the next thing that I think we need to take care of is how do they do it, right? It's actually very simple, right? Nowadays, I think we know, right? Because we are so used to transacting on the internet, a lot of our own personal credentials could be out there, right? We never know, right? Somebody could copy it, follow it, track it, or whatever, right? So there are a bunch of people out there or systems out there who actually steals or compromises these user IDs. So in this example, what I've shown is that if somebody infects a machine, they will exfiltrate that data, the user ID, password, phone numbers, etc., sells it or provides it to the ransomware threat actors, right? So there are people who actually buy this on the dark web. And they will use this user IDs, right, with the passwords and everything, pretend to be you, let's say if they want to target you, and use it to access your system or your enterprise. Yeah. And of course, they will trigger the activities that they want to. So this is the way things are being done now when it comes to launching ransomware attacks. Right? This is pre-launch. And what we want to note is, where is the gap in this? Why are these things still happening? All right. Despite all the solutions out there, despite all the processes and or the education that's being done to the users, why is there still a gap? Right? Why is this thing still so prevalent? Very simple. All right. We boil down to two different tools, all right, or instances. The first one is the usage of MFA as an effective tool, right? I think probably most, if not all, you are familiar with what is MFA. What it stands for is multi-factor authentication. If you folks have a internet banking account and you want to access your bank account, you'll be triggered on your phone, right? Via a push notification, to verify that is it you or is it somebody else, right? So that's why you accept or reject and gain access to your internet bank account. That's an example of MFA, right? The other example, or the other area that we need to look at, which comprises this gap, is something called service accounts or service IDs. So for those of you who are IT administrators, service accounts are very simply machine accounts, right? There are no humans behind it, no human users. They are set up to do a specific task. Like, for example, in a telco provider, when you get your monthly bills, right, for your internet and your cell phone, there are service accounts behind it that generate those bills, those amounts, and your usage, right? It's not done by people. So that's an example. So these two areas are actually important focal points for us in addressing how we handle ransomware and lateral movement. And I'll show you why. Yeah. So in this instance, let's take the example of a user account that has been compromised. Yeah. And this is where what we call a blind spot for MFA. Now, as you know, right, I mentioned just now earlier example that if you are let's say a customer of a bank and you want to gain access to your account via your internet banking portal, they will challenge you with MFA on your phone, right, or a token. There are some instances in the IT environment, and those of you who manage IT systems or identity systems can relate to this, where it is impossible to put, or very challenging to deploy an MFA solution. MFA itself is a very effective tool, right? Because it puts the power of the yes or no permission base into the user's hands. But there are some areas within your organization where you cannot do that. One of these areas is something called command line, right? This is the, you open up your if you're a desktop administrator, you open up your black screen and your blue screen, right? This is your PowerShell systems, BSSX, low-level interfaces, right? So these areas do not have MFA there, right? Because they were designed before MFA solutions came about. So as a result, there's no way to put an MFA agent to work, right? So if somebody gains access of the user ID and password, that's all they need, right? They cannot be challenged by MFA. But the hackers know this, and the hackers have utilized this, and I'm going to show you one real-life example in a while. And of course, they go in and infect all your systems, right? Or encrypt your drives and things like that. Do what ransomware folks do. Yeah. And the sad part is, as I mentioned as well, there's no MFA available for this. Yeah, but there is a solution which I'll come about in a while. And so what happened is that, in your environment, right, there's a lot of emphasis that we see with enterprises across the region, Asia Pacific region, that puts a lot of emphasis on network-based security or even endpoint security, right? They buy a lot of stuff like firewalls, IPS devices, EDR, XDR, and things like that. But there's not been a lot of attention being paid to identity, right? So as you can see from here, if somebody pretends to be you, right? This is you as an innocent person, and this is your evil twin. Yeah, the evil twin and the innocent person cannot be differentiated by your network system or your EDR system. You need an identity system to know, is that person really who he or she is? Yeah. So this is where Silverfort can help. Yeah. So more onto that later. The other area I want to address, which comprises of the the gaps that we see, is the service accounts, all right, or the service IDs. So a few things about it, right? So service IDs, if you talk to a typical enterprise, most of the time, if they are honest, they will have no idea of exactly how many service accounts they have in their environment. The answer is very simple, because service accounts are created typically by IT administrators. They come and go, right? They move on to other jobs, they change, they take other roles and so on. Unless they are very fastidious in keeping records, there will be a bunch of service accounts or IDs which will be hidden that nobody knows. And some of them have high access or admin privileges. And they are also having a lack of protection, in the sense that they could have very simple passwords, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? Or some passwords have not changed for 1 year or 2 years, right? So obviously, you know, if I'm a hacker, right, and I'm a ransomware actor, these are the accounts I will go after, right? Because nobody knows they exist, nobody supervises them. Some of them have very high privileges. Perfect storm. Yeah. So what we want to do is, you know, to take stock, all right? And how we want to do it is, let's look at this is the real example, by the way. So this actually happened with Uber, right? In September last year. So how did they do it? Classic example of a ransomware infiltration. First, a user, which was a third-party contractor, was compromised. The user ID was stolen and used to log in, right? They managed to gain access to service accounts. Again, what I just said in the last slide, right? Service IDs being unprotected, having old passwords, people are not even aware of them. What they did is, back to 2 slides ago, I mentioned that low-level interfaces like PowerShell do not have MFA protection, or are not able to activate MFA protection. So they use PowerShell to move laterally between the systems, gain admin credentials, yeah, and moving more across multiple machines and multiple systems, and then finally execute the program when they hit their target or destination system. Yeah, so it could be sensitive data, you know, that they can encrypt and demand a ransom, or they could be a more destructive ransomware where they want to expose those credentials, right? Yeah. So this is actually the anatomy of a typical ransomware attack. Yeah. So for Silverfort, right? So I've kind of showed you the challenges and gaps that a ransomware attack can happen, right? This is where we can help you to, you know, we have helped enterprises to protect themselves, right? So we call ourselves unified identity protection. What do we mean by that, right? So from this diagram, you can see that you know, a typical enterprise usually have multiple identity systems, right? You know, your best example would be your Microsoft Active Directory, right? This is the one that maintains the user IDs and passwords. You could have some cloud-based IDPs, people like Okta or Ping, right, or Azure AD. Of course, for many of you who work from home or work remotely, you dial into your company systems via VPN, right? So this is where your Checkpoint, your Silverfort, your Palo Alto, right, your Fortinet. Yeah. So all these are directory systems that maintain individual IDs. Where Silverfort comes in is we sit on top of all these systems like an overlay, and we are able to see in real time all the activity that every user ID is doing. We can see which user, for that particular user ID, where they're going, where they have gone, what they have done, what they have attempted to access, right? And based on that, you're able to build up a risk profile. And because of the risk profile, if they do something out of the ordinary, let's say this user is trying to access a system that they have never accessed before, and they're doing multiple times over the past hour or so, right? So we will trigger an alert, and then we will activate that, right? I'm going to go into detail on that a little while later. So in this way, we are able to provide real-time protection. Yeah. So how does it work, right? So very simply, right? So I mentioned just now, you know, your users, both human and non-human, which is service accounts, will try to access systems, right? So wherever it's in the cloud, on premises, or even air-gapped environments. And what they would do typically, let's say if you're trying to open up your Windows, login, right, into your laptop, and you're accessing your machine through your Windows login, they will check for your username and password, right? And if it's okay, then they will allow you in. What we do, as I mentioned just now, where we sit on top as an overlay, is that we also check the context of the access, right? The context access is based on three things. We continuously monitor the activity, as I mentioned just now in my last slide. We also have built-in machine learning to do risk analysis. And based on the policies that you have set, like say, for example, you do not allow anyone to access from, let's say, Russia, right? So you can put a geographical location policy as well. Yeah, or you don't allow people with from this group of users to access a sensitive system. So that can be enforced as well, right? And how do we enforce it? We will trigger MFAs, right? So let's say if you have a third-party MFA, or if you don't have an MFA solution, you can use Silverfort. We provide it as well. You can use the MFA to enforce. So let's say, back to my example, right? The user tries to access a system, maybe on a weekend where that he or she has never done it before, and they're trying to access it multiple times within the last hour. That to us is suspicious behavior, right? We will do the continuous monitoring and we'll analyze and say, hey, this user is doing something out of the ordinary, right? We need to trigger a control response. How do we trigger? We will activate the MFA, the solution, can be any MFA, right? RSA, Duo, Microsoft, whatever, and ask the MFA solution to send an MFA notification to that user, maybe using a push notification on his phone, right? He receives a message in the cell phone and say, hey, is that you trying to access the system? So the user says, yes, I'm trying to do some work. I'm trying to access the system to access data, right? Then you click on the green button, yes, and he gets admitted. If it's no, I'm not, I'm out with my family on a Saturday night, it's not me, reject, and then we will deny. Yeah, that's how it works, right? So that's a very elegant manner, right? Because it puts the power of the decision into the user's hands, and it all happens in real time. Enforcement and control as well. For us, I think I would say not just for us, right? For any serious security solution vendor out there, it's always good to have collaborations with other people. So we share our information with some of the brands that you see down here, right? And this can be correlated to further strengthen responses, right? This is how we reach verdicts. And of course, this information is shared up to your security team, to your identity teams, right? To take further action or investigation if you need to. But the good thing is we have already taken action for you. We see a threat, we send an MFA. If it's a real threat, the user says, no, it's not me, clicks deny on his phone, we will block it. Yeah. So that's how it works, right? And if you look at this diagram, just spend the next few minutes, right? You can see different levels of interfaces, right? For example, like this one, he tries to go in through remote desktop, right? He looks good, he looks user ID, everything works out, but we can see that this, based on his profile and the activity, the way he behaves, it's not a legitimate user, right? It's a fake user who has compromised someone's credential, right? So various interfaces we can go, right? Remote PowerShell, desktop, login, right? So even if your Active Directory, like your username and password allows it, we are able to know whether this person is malicious or benign. Yeah, so web applications as well, right? You try to access through web applications, PS exact, right? If it's real, we will allow. If it's not real, we will deny. Yeah, and we will use MFA as the enforcement tool. Yeah. So the other one I was talking about, it's the automated service protection. So what we do is that firstly, as a best practice, it's always good to know what you can see, right? The worst thing is not knowing the unknown. We want to make the unknown known. So what's the unknown here? The unknown is the number of service accounts that you have, right? So we have an algorithm where we can search for actual service accounts and suspected service accounts, right? So service accounts do have certain behavior that we can detect and immediately bring light and visibility to it. And after that, we will monitor the pattern of the service account, look at what they're doing. Are they doing right? Are they behaving suspiciously? And you can create policies to enforce that will allow or disallow the service accounts from doing certain things. Let's say, for example, a certain service account was compromised and they are being used to access maybe a highly sensitive system, right? To gain access to certain folders. So, if you apply the right policy, if you accept the right policy, you'll be able to immediately pick this up and block it. Yeah. Now, for service accounts, there's no MFA enforcement, right? Because it's a machine account, right? There's no human user behind it to accept or deny the MFA notification. So you can encode the rules and able to enforce those policies to protect yourselves better. Yeah. So back to what I mentioned, right? So how does Silverfort able to help you in this? So firstly, right, this is remember, this is the typical anatomy of a ransomware attack. We will be able to stop the lateral movement because I mentioned this one, right? The service account credentials, we're able to enforce policies to prevent service accounts from being misused or going to where they want to go. Yeah. The other one, of course, is the PowerShell script, right? This is the one where if your command line interfaces, the low level interfaces, the MFAs cannot use, you can use it to enforce. You can use MFA to enforce it. Yeah. So I think with that, I have come to an end. Hope I didn't go too fast. Welcome the floor for any questions. Yeah. Comments. Yeah.
Yep, let's check the live viewers if they have questions. EDRD. Yeah. So thank you for that, Juankit. Maybe I'll ask first.
Sure.
Yeah. So we have read the reports, the latest one, the 2021 report, wherein there were about 69% of the surveyed organizations experienced ransomware attacks in the Philippines.
Yes.
And the number goes up, every day. And as a cybersecurity evangelist or enthusiast like yourself, how would you guide or what are your advice to our listeners here to prevent this kind of incidents? Yeah.
Okay. So I think what people should do, even before looking at solutions or buying solutions, is probably to do an assessment, right? So assessments can be done in a few ways. Silverfort itself, we do assessments for our customers as well, right? So you can talk to us, or you can talk to your security partner that you're close with, to do a security assessment of the weak points in your environment, because ransomware can come from many venues, right? So what we find in Silverfort, just a word of advice from us, is that more often than not, right, up to 82% of ransomware attacks will utilize some sort of stolen or compromised identity, a user ID. So there's a high probability if an enterprise suffers a ransomware attack, that 82% of the time somebody's user ID has been misused. So you might want to look into that first and assess, are they being protected or not? And then from there, you will go into areas which I mentioned, like are you able to enforce MFA or block policies when users are accessing sensitive systems, right? Are there policies in place to protect service accounts from being abused, right? Because service accounts tend to be another weak point. I think if you do these two things right, you probably reduce a significant amount of ransomware activity. Will it eliminate 100%? Most likely not, right? There's no foolproof system in the world. Will we remove it significantly? Yes.
Agree. Thanks for that, Ankit. So maybe any questions from Yeah, I think we have a question in our FB. Arlene, can
Yes.
you read? Yeah.
Okay. From one of our viewers, I think it's Miss Reddy Ramos. How are you going to identify that ransomware is in the early stages and removing detected malicious file is enough? That's her first question.
Yeah, sorry, can you repeat that question?
Okay. How are you going to identify that ransomware is in the early stages and removing detected malicious file is enough? So let's say there is a, how would you know that you are already infected by the ransomware? And is it enough that you deleted the files immediately for you not to be able to be infected by the ransomware anymore? Would that be enough?
Okay, so what I'll show you today is actually to prevent the spread of ransomware from patient 0 to patient 1. The audience member has asked a specific question on how to even prevent ransomware from coming in the first place, right? So there are a couple of ways to do that. The first thing is have a very efficient anti-phishing email solution in place, right? That's not a Silverfort solution, right? Not a Silverfort solution. There'll be something else. So Silverfort, as you can see from one of my diagrams just now, where we collaborate with a whole bunch of other solution vendors, that's where the most effective ransomware prevention comes in. You protect yourselves from being patient 0. And if you are patient 0, you protect yourselves from the patient 0 infecting more patients. Where we come in is the second stage. We want to stop the spread of ransomware. But to prevent ransomware from even coming in the first place, or at least to lower the chances, deploy a very good anti-phishing email solution, because email phishing tends to be one of the favorite tactics of ransomware actors. The other one is, of course, to have a very good endpoint solution, right? These are your EDR or EPP solutions, right? Yeah, I won't mention names, right? Because I will be promoting other names besides Silverfort, yeah. But there are some good ones. And we do collaborate with all of them. So that's a good thing, right? How we collaborate, they share information with us and we share information with them. For example, let's say we find a user ID behaving suspiciously, right? They're trying to access a certain system. We take the data, we take those data points, we share it across to the endpoint protection vendor, right? The solution vendor, and say, hey, we found that this particular machine and this particular user is, behaving suspiciously. Maybe you can run a scan, right? Using your endpoint solution, a security solution. Then they can trigger them to run a scan and to do further checks, right? Like things like memory dumps and files, compromised files and all that. Yeah. Likewise, they can also do the same to us, right? They can say, oh, this user PC is behaving suspiciously, or the server. They can send a file to us, then we will monitor that particular user ID movement, right? While they're trying to access, and we can even raise the risk profile and challenge them with an MFA. Yeah.
Okay, so once a file is suspicious, stop and have it scanned. Just basically, once you get it and you spread it out, that's the time that the ransomware will indeed become a threat to everybody in the community. That's very good. I hope that that we're able to answer that. Pipiris, if I may, there is another question coming from Reddy Ramos. What is the remediation you are going to do to the ransomware infected machine, assuming that endpoint protection is able to detect and block related process? So you already detected that that particular equipment has a ransomware. What are you going to do about it?
Okay, let's say the PC is infected, right? So you need to do the cleanup. Silverfort doesn't do cleanup, right? Silverfort detects and controls. If you want to do the cleanup, you will have to, I would say, utilize a remediation vendor, right, or a partner who can do the cleanup and the investigation for you. What we want to do is one step before that, right? We want to avoid the situation from happening in the first place, right? Nobody wants to do cleanup of their systems after they get infected, because it's a very tedious and very expensive, costly task. What we want to do is two things, right? And these are two good practices to follow, whether it's Silverfort or it's somebody else. The first thing is you are able to detect suspicious activity, right? I mentioned just now, you want to detect, if it's patient 0 trying to look for patient 1, 2, and 3, you want to stop that from happening, right? And our ability, Silverfort's ability to see the suspicious movement and suspicious activity would, in all probability, prevent that. The second step, of course, is to able to not just detect, but to respond and control automatically. Because if you depend on a team, let's say your security operations team, to detect and find something out, it might be too late, right? Because humans are not 100% efficient. If you have a properly coded machine learning tool, like what we have, we are able to detect and immediately either block it if it's very serious, or if it's high risk, we will trigger a MFA notification to the end user to check with the end user and say, hey, is that really you trying to access the system? Yes, it's me. I'm doing legitimate work. Fine, we let it through, right? If it's no, it's not me. I'm not trying to access this particular system. Reject. This alert will be sent to the security operations team. Then they can do further investigation, right? So in a sense, it's not remediation, because remediation means you are trying to do damage control. This is proactive measure. We tell the person that we tell the security operations that this user ID is highly likely to be compromised because the actual user ID owner has already raised the flag. Can you check further on this? Right? They can run other scans, they can get the EDR to do things, they can run their scanning tools and things like that. Yeah. So it's a very good hygiene practice. There are many tools out there that can do detect of suspicious movement, but there are very few, if any, like us, like Silverfort, that can do the automated response and control. Yeah.
Thanks for that, Hodgit. There's also another question from Sir Dorwin Caballero. How is Silverfort integrated into the system?
Oh, okay. So there are two aspects I did not mention just now because I wanted to keep it as technically light as possible. So I'll move one level deeper now. Silverfort does not use any agents, proxies, or need any code changes at the endpoint. So, in a way, this sounds like a nirvana of solutions, right? Wow, you can deploy a solution without using agents to detect movements. Yes, that is correct. We do not need agents. How we deploy? What we do is we depend on the Microsoft Active Directory. So that's what we need in your environment. We will put our solution, which is a small application, sitting behind Microsoft Active Directory. So what that means is that we function like a port mirror. Every authentication message that goes through Microsoft Active Directory, such as your logging in your username and password, we will get a copy of that authentication message. And then we will act based on that user ID's profile, policies in place, the behavior of the user ID that we have observed, and any suspicious activity that we see, if there is, around the user ID. Yeah. So it's a simple deployment and a simple architecture.
All right, I believe so. Thank you for that, Tonki. We have another question. Apart from the lateral movement that you've shared today, MFA or identity solution is actually not new to us in the market. With that, how does Silverfort differentiate your solution among the other competitors or other similar, brands?
Yeah, that's an interesting question actually, and I'll answer in two parts. The first part is we don't actually have any direct competitors. Yeah. And why I say that, this is the second part. Although I mentioned MFA a lot, we are not in the business of providing MFA. What I mean by that is we tend to work with our customers who have MFA solutions. And I believe the majority of enterprises in the Philippines already do have an MFA solution. Typical examples would be Microsoft Authenticator, RSA, Duo, and so on and so forth. When I say we work with them, is that we are in the business of analyzing risky behavior for users, right? Whether it's human users or machine users, and we find that they are risky enough then we will use whatever MFA that the customer is using, let's say Microsoft or RSA, to enforce that policy, right? Or to do a counter check, right? We tell RSA, for example, can you send a notification to user ID XYZ and get him to verify, is that really him accessing this particular system or not? Yeah. Now, in those rare cases where the user, the customer, the enterprise really does not have any MFA solution or wants to throw out the MFA solution, we do have our own. Yeah. But, and it's all included, right? It's one price. But we are not in the business of going around replacing MFA solutions. We want to.
So it's a complementary. Yeah.
Yes. We want to enhance the use. Yes.
Right.
Because
Okay.
remember the example I mentioned?
Yep.
MFA can be used in certain applications like web applications or certain on-premise applications. They cannot be used in legacy systems. They cannot be used in low-level interfaces. And these are the systems that the hackers are going after because they know nobody can use MFA in those situations to control access until now, of course, where Silverfort comes in.
All right. I think we have another question from our FB viewer, Arlie.
Yes, another follow-up question from Reddy Ramos. Is there any case that a service account was used for ransomware? And if there is, how can it be prevented? According to her, I think MFA is not applicable with service accounts. Actually, this has happened to us in the country most of the time. So is it possible that service accounts can be used?
Yes.
And if so, how can it be prevented? And is MFA enough to secure our service accounts?
Okay, very poignant question, right? So as I mentioned during my presentation, service accounts are a highly attractive target for hackers. Personally, if I'm a hacker, that's one of the first things I go after. So how do you prevent the misuse? There are two aspects to it. I touch upon it and I'll repeat it here. Firstly, you need to take stock of how many service accounts you have in your environment, right? The first point of risk is that most businesses, if they are honest, they really don't have a clue of how many service accounts they have. So we have our own tool to actually detect and fish out all those service accounts for you. And it's not just a list of service accounts, it's also a list of service accounts by risk rating, right? Which ones are more risky, which ones are less risky, based on our own understanding. And those risky ones, like people like, their passwords have never changed, they have administrative rights, we will rank them at the top. And this is where, you got to work with the team, your security teams, to decide what to do with these service accounts. Some service accounts can be expunged, right? Can be removed, right? They are no longer useful for what they were in the past. Others, like such as admin rights, you want to set some policies, like also it's almost like a firewall rule, right? You set a rule in place. You can say, okay, this service account can access certain server ABC, for example, to do a certain automated task, right? Like, for example, I mentioned earlier where service accounts are typically used to generate your monthly phone bills. But if they want to access anything else besides generating monthly phone bills, we will prevent that. So currently in the market, as far as I know, there's no solution that can do that. Yeah. So I hope that that answers the question of how to have a best practice to prevent.
Okay, Sir Honkit. According to Reddy, Silverfort solution is analytics reporting and alerting. Are we limited to analytics reporting and alerting with Silverfort?
No, we are not limited just by analytics. Analytics is definitely an important part of our solution because we have machine learning in place to detect user behavior and also to detect typical ransomware type of attacks, right? Because there are some subtle signs within the ransomware attacks, like they may want to compromise certain directories, right? That we always see in a lot of ransomware attacks. We will take note of that and we will raise alert if we see them. Other things that we also do is we work together with with our customers to enforce best practice policies, access policies, right? These are the things that we see from a lot of our customers. we will share with any new customers that we have, like for example in the Philippines. Like for example for banks, right? It is very important to create access policies for maybe certain super admin group users, right? What they can do, what they cannot do. We will help work with the customers to create that. Yeah. And also in the right context, right? For example, I mentioned earlier that somebody from overseas who's accessing, right? He may be the same super admin, but your company may not allow people to access a certain system outside of the Philippines. Yeah, for example, right? So that can also be done. So it can be quite granular. So this is the other best practice that you should adopt, right? I think even without Silverfort in place, if you have some sort of like an access control matrix, it's a good idea to go through it, to scrub it, and to put in place the policies to allow or disallow in depending on the role, the user, the project, and the circumstances. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Honkit. We would like to greet our Bacolod chapter president, Press Alan Pakulan is yeah. Hi, Press Alan. Yes. So we have our last question. Ray, please proceed.
Yes, Hotkit, for the last question. So we keep seeing or hearing about Silverfort's identity threat detection and response. So we would like to hear more, or we would like to also share that with our listeners today. So can you explain more about it and its relevance in cybersecurity, most especially here in Philippines?
Sure. Now, as Ray has said, right, Identity Threat Detection and Response, or ITDR for short, this is a relatively new category issued by Gartner, I think about a year and a half ago. And this is relating to what you are probably already familiar with in the network space and the endpoint space, right? You've heard terms like NDR or EDR, right? So now they have an ITDR. And the reason why this ITDR or identity-based type of threats and mitigation is becoming more and more important is because we see a lot of enterprises around the world who has not invested sufficiently to protect their identities or prevent them from being misused, right? As I showed in a couple of examples earlier. A lot of enterprises, including the Philippines, have invested heavily into network security, into endpoint security, into what we call perimeter, right? Or even cloud-based security. What they do not know, or maybe may not realize, is that if a user ID is stolen or compromised, right? And nowadays it's very easy to be stolen, right? I mean, who knows? Even my user ID could be out there somewhere. Once it's stolen, I can use this stolen ID to bypass any network system you have, any endpoint system you have, any cloud-based system you have. There's nothing you can do to stop it, because those systems don't check, is it Honkit accessing or is it somebody, an imposter who's pretending to be accessing? They do not check that, right? They do not check the behavior of the user ID. To them, once I go in, you're legitimate, you're true, right? There's no enforcement tool to check, right? They don't trigger MFAs, they don't trigger policies, they don't have the intelligence to detect the user ID behavior. Like me trying to access a system on a Saturday night, right? When I typically don't. Yeah, things like this are not in place at the moment. And this is where I think Silverfort, as a responsible vendor, or even myself personally, right, as a responsible cybersecurity practitioner, should make note, right, and get the folks out there to be aware of this risk and to do something about it, right, whether it's with Silverfort or with somebody else. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, Honkit, for that very informative session that we have.
You're
so
welcome.
again, thank you so much. Let's do this again sometime. So again, we would like to acknowledge our VP for 𝐵ICSPro Cares is here, Miss VP Ruby. Say hi.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hi, hello, sir Honkit.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone.
Siguro, VP Ruby, can you share us also our Sunday program that we will have for 𝐵ICSPro Cares? We did an intro kanina.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. I hope, Sir Honkit, you can come. This coming Sunday, we have a 𝐼CSPro Cares. This is actually a community outreach in one of the towns in Region 4. We're going to do a cybersecurity awareness. Actually, it's more of the dangers of internet to women and children. And we will be focusing on the mother and child team. So they'll be able to discuss while they're sitting and listening to us. They could discuss on how to together as mother and child team can prevent them from not being victims of phishing and other forms of dangers in the internet. So it's gonna happen on Sunday, and we are all excited. This is the first, but definitely not the last.
Yes, it's gonna be like a series of
Yes.
cybersecurity awareness that we will bring to the community. Yeah, so thank you for that, VP Ruby, for spearheading our 𝐼CSPro Cares program. So again, thank you so much, Juanquit.
Thank you. Pleasure's mine.
Yeah, yes. So I guess we're just on time, no, for our
Yes.
to wrap up our session for today for our Kwentuhang Cybersecurity. We'll see you again next week. Yeah.
Yes.
So please stay tuned for our next topic. Yeah. So again, thank you so much, Silverfort. Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Ray, from
Thank you,
Thank you
Mr.
for having me here.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Mr.
Thank you. Thank you.
So
Have a
are
good
we
weekend.
yeah, so are
you.
we ready for our weekend greeting?
Yeah.
Sabay-sabay.
Yes.
Yeah, so again, sa cybersecurity,
Security.
happy lang,
Happy lang, walang
walang
weekend.
weekend.
Bye-bye.
Thank
See
you
Bye,
so
everyone.
much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.